ROI has a blind spot. It measures outputs while remaining largely silent on the human conditions required to produce them. It tracks what was delivered, but not how the work was experienced. It captures efficiency, but not strain. It rewards speed, but often misses the quiet erosion of trust, judgment, and energy that accumulates along the way. The result is a growing gap between what organizations optimize for and what they consume in the process. Performance can hold, even improve, while the human capacity required to sustain it quietly degrades. What if the most dangerous risks inside your organization aren't the ones you can see? What if they're the ones no one feels safe enough to say out loud? Welcome to a very special episode and a new chapter of Return on Empathy, or ROE. I'm Rebecca Dhrimaj, your host of this podcast and founder of the Empathy Collective, a community of leaders who believe in creating workplaces where people thrive. If you've been listening for a while, you may know this podcast by its original name, Engage and Empower with Empathy. That show was built around a simple but important idea, that empathy is a powerful way to engage and empower people at work. But over time, through conversations with leaders across industries and through the work happening behind the scenes, it became clear that empathy isn't just a leadership behavior. It's something much more fundamental. It's how leaders understand reality. And when it's missing, the consequences don't just show up in culture or engagement. They show up in hidden risks and decisions made without full visibility into how work is actually experienced. That realization is what led to this evolution, to return on empathy. Because the question is no longer just how empathy helps people feel, it's what empathy allows leaders to see, understand, and ultimately get right. And today marks an important moment in that journey. In this episode, I'm going to read the introduction to a forthcoming book that I'm co-authoring with my dad and business partner, Dave Galloway, president of Continuous Mile Consulting. This book represents a deepening of these ideas. It challenges how we define performance, how we measure success, and what we choose to pay attention to and what we don't. At its core, this work is about a critical blind spot in modern organizations. Leaders are measuring performance with increasing precision, while losing visibility into how work is actually experienced. And when that happens, something dangerous begins to unfold. Warning signs get missed, truth gets filtered, and risks don't disappear. They go underground. What you're about to hear is not a framework, it's not a model, it's a story. Actually, two stories. Stories that reveal what happens when empathy is absent, not as a feeling, but as a way of seeing clearly. Stories that raise a deeper question. What is the real cost of leadership decisions when we fail to understand how they land on the people responsible for carrying them out? After this episode, we'll begin a special Leadership Excellence series with Bob Quinn, who will also be writing the foreword for this book. That series will explore what it truly means to lead at a higher level of awareness, responsibility, and impact. And as part of this next chapter, I'm super excited to tell all of you that we are preparing to launch an online community in June called the Empathy Collective, the same name as our consulting business. And this is a place where leaders come together to learn from each other, challenge their thinking, and build more human-centered organizations in practice. Bob Quinn will be joining us there as well for a special appearance at launch, so stay tuned for that. So yeah, this is more than a podcast. It's the beginning of a broader movement. And before we begin, I want to dedicate this and all future ROE episodes to the late Bob Chapman, former CEO and chairman of Barry-Wehmiller and co-author of the book Everybody Matters, whose leadership and philosophy helped redefine what it means to truly care for people and organizations. His legacy continues to shape our work at the Empathy Collective in profound ways. We miss you, Bob. Now, I invite you to listen closely, not just to the words, but to what they reveal. This is Return on Empathy. On the wall above the line, the safety light glowed green. 0 incidents, 0 near misses. Days since last injury, 214. The plant was loud in the way safety critical operations always are. Compressed air hissing, conveyors humming, steel clattering into place. The floor vibrated faintly underfoot. Heat radiated from the equipment, steady and relentless, like a held breath. The supervisor spoke loudly so we could hear each other over the machinery. He pointed to the board with the pride of someone who'd fought hard to keep it clean. Audits passed, procedures followed, PPE worn, the system was working. As we walked the line, I noticed the smell first. Hot oil, sharper than it should have been. Then the sound, a faint, irregular knock buried inside the rhythm of the machine. Not enough vibration to trip a sensor. Not new enough to draw attention. Just there. We stopped near a press guarded by steel mesh and warning placards. The operator inside moved with precision. Hands steady, eyes trained, body angled just right to avoid the danger zones painted on the floor. I asked him a routine question. Anything that makes the job harder than it needs to be? He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked. Not to the machine, but past me toward the supervisor. The press cycled again. The knock came back, hollow and dull. It's fine, he said. Fine. It was a qualified response, a word that masked his true thoughts. Later during a break, the noise dropped away and the plant felt strangely exposed without it. In the quiet, another operator leaned against a railing and rubbed his forearm absently. I asked him about the knock. He exhaled slowly before speaking. Yeah, we hear it. He explained how the machine behaved differently near the end of long runs, how a guard sometimes needed a little extra pressure to seat properly, how everyone knew which step to rush and which one not to skip when production targets were tight. I asked why it hadn't been reported. He shrugged. No one wants to be the reason the line goes down. You bring it up once or twice, after that you learn. Learn what? When it's safe to talk, he said, and when it's not. 2 weeks later, the incident report described it as a sudden failure. A pin sheared, a guard shifted. The machine did exactly what it was designed to do when human flesh crossed its path. The alarms worked perfectly that day, but the operator hesitated for a split second. The slow reaction time cost his index finger. The investigation found no egregious violations. Training records were current, standard operating procedures, at least on paper, were being followed. Standing on that floor afterward, the smell was different. Burnt plastic, metal scorched where it shouldn't have been. The silence felt heavy. What failed that day wasn't the equipment. It was something harder to see. Leadership's ability to hear the truth before someone got hurt. The plant had been measuring safety compliance meticulously. What they hadn't measured was fear. And fear is one of the most dangerous conditions a system can operate under. Across town, another company suffered from the same critical organizational flaw. Different situation, identical root cause. A colleague, a former senior design engineer, recalled the key events that led to a disastrous outcome. Initially, the quarterly reviews went smoothly. Every chart was green, deadlines were met, revenue was up, no major risks were identified. Leaders congratulated each other on their team's execution and project discipline. What didn't appear on the slides were conversations that never happened. By the third review, engineers had stopped challenging timelines. Analysts flagged issues privately, then worked around them. Meetings ended quickly because agreement came fast with minimal discussion. Why? Raising concerns had a cost. People who asked hard questions were labeled not aligned. Those who escalated risks were told they were slowing things down. These employees were either sidelined or put on performance improvement plans until they could demonstrate they were team players. After a few of those conversations, everyone learned the same lesson. Keep problems small and quiet. No one wanted to be the messenger of bad news. When the senior engineer realized the new system wouldn't scale for a major new client, he hesitated. He knew the fix was expensive and the timing was inconvenient. The last person who'd raised a similar issue had been sidelined. He had a family to provide for, and the job market was weak. So he documented it privately, added a workaround, and said nothing. 3 weeks later, the company signed the contract with a new customer. The first failure was minor. The second damaged trust. After the third failure, the client walked away. Executives called it an unexpected market outcome. Behind the scenes and around the water cooler, employees who worked on the project called it inevitable. Leadership had built systems to track performance, delivery, and new product growth. What they never measured was how dangerous it felt for employees to tell the truth. And in that environment, the most critical warning signs didn't disappear. They went underground. What do these stories share? In both cases, leaders were blind to or ignorant of the impact their decisions had on employees. When leaders lack humility under pressure, fear becomes normalized and critical information stops moving upward long before systems fail. These organizations lack cognitive empathy for how work is actually experienced. In this book, we will describe the reasons why many companies suffer from this malady and provide concrete actions leaders can take to build an empathetic organization. For decades, leaders have been trained to define success through a financial lens. Most organizations can answer a familiar set of questions with confidence. Are we profitable? Are we growing? Are we financially stable? These questions matter. They shape how decisions are evaluated, how accountability is enforced, and how performance is rewarded. Return on investment, or ROI, has become the dominant expression of that logic. It is precise, comparable, and widely understood. It tells leaders whether capital was deployed efficiently and whether outcomes justified the cost. In doing so, it has profoundly shaped how organizations think about performance itself. But ROI has a blind spot. It measures outputs while remaining largely silent on the human conditions required to produce them. It tracks what was delivered, but not how the work was experienced. It captures efficiency, but not strain. It rewards speed, but often misses the quiet erosion of trust, judgment, and energy that accumulates along the way. The result is a growing gap between what organizations optimize for and what they consume in the process. Performance can hold, even improve, while the human capacity required to sustain it quietly degrades. Change initiatives launch with discipline and urgency, yet adoption lags. Engagement surveys plateau, burnout rises. Resistance appears where commitment was expected. None registers cleanly on the balance sheet, yet all of it shapes whether results are sustainable over time. Gallup's 2024 engagement survey shows that the percentage of U.S. employees who are engaged at work has returned to a 10-year low. Evidence that engagement has stagnated and more recently declined over the past decade. Gallup distinguishes engagement from employee well-being. Their data show that even as engagement remains historically low, employee well-being has deteriorated. Fewer employees are thriving, more are reporting daily stress, worry, and burnout. These trends suggest that traditional engagement metrics, while familiar and easy to administer, are insufficient for understanding how work is experienced and why performance often erodes long before financial indicators change. These are not cultural anomalies or motivation problems. They are predictable consequences of evaluating success without fully accounting for how leadership decisions land on the people expected to carry them out. When leaders lack a clear view of those human consequences, they are often flying blind, optimizing near-term results while unknowingly spending down the very capacity future performance depends on. This gap requires expanding how we think about return, not by abandoning financial rigor, but by complementing it. It requires a way to account for the human consequences leadership decisions create and to treat those consequences as material rather than incidental. We call this return on empathy. So, what you just heard is a little excerpt from the introduction of our forthcoming book, Return on Empathy. It's a starting point, not just for this book, but for a different way of thinking about leadership itself. Because the challenge in front of us isn't a lack of metrics or tools or frameworks, it's a lack of visibility, a lack of clarity into how work is actually experienced by the people we rely on to deliver results. And when that visibility is lost, leaders don't just miss information, they make decisions in the dark. And that's what return on empathy is really about. Not empathy as a sentiment, but empathy as a form of intelligence, a way to see what others miss, to hear what isn't being said, and to recognize risk before it becomes failure. So, in the coming episodes, we'll build on these ideas, starting with the Leadership Excellence series I mentioned earlier, featuring my dear friend Bob Quinn, who is a best-selling author and professor emeritus at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. We'll explore what it means to lead with greater awareness, courage, and responsibility in today's environment. So I encourage you to tune in to the next few episodes that we'll be publishing throughout the month of April. And in June, we'll take this even further with the launch of our new online community called the Empathy Collective. This is a space for leaders who are ready to move beyond theory and into practice, a place to learn, challenge assumptions, and build this ROE capability together. So, if this introduction resonated with you, if it made you pause or reflect or question something about how leadership shows up in your organization, then you're exactly where you belong. Welcome to the Empathy Collective community, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you would like to learn more about the Empathy Collective, check out our website, theempathycollective.com. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.